Ruthless Compassion is a podcast about how you can turn your emotional shit into fertilizer for success and see your darkest moments as opportunities to transform into a powerful kindness warrior. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a review wherever you listen. Welcome, Leanne Nicolle, to the Ruthless Compassion podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mercy. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited. As I was saying before we started, I think a lot of our views and passions align. We're very interested in similar things. And, the first thing I want to do is have you introduce yourself so that the listeners know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Leanne Nicolle, and I am the privileged and honored CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters here in Toronto. We're an organization that provides positive, consistent, caring adults in the lives of children who have faced enormous adversity. So it is a wonder to come to work every day to work on this mandate and on this mission. I feel very privileged to be the CEO at this time, especially with the needs of children and young people changing and adversities becoming so great post-pandemic. So I'm very happy to be here at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and that's where I've landed, and that's where I come every day. It's an amazing place to be.
So before I ask you how you ended up with this job, just give me like a couple of sentences about what Big Brothers Big Sisters actually do.
Yeah, so Big Brothers Big Sisters, it's interesting, right, Marcia? Because people think they know what we do at Big Brothers Big Sisters because we've been around for 117 years. So, it's almost like there's this public perception of Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it so nice to provide friends for those poor kids? And in fact, what we do is we insert developmental relationships in the lives of children who have faced enormous adversity. And why that's important is that without positive, consistent, caring adults, the long-term negative health outcomes, both mental and physical for these children, are very highly likely. So we set up kids so they're more likely to thrive and less likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors through the heroic efforts of our volunteer Big Brothers and Big Sisters.
No, you're absolutely right. When you say that having a loving, supportive adult presence in the life of a child makes a huge difference, because I can tell from all the years I was a psychotherapist, the ones that were able to get through their traumas were the ones who had somebody, just one person who was steady and loving and supportive and not crazy making. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's wonderful. Well, okay, so let's talk about the journey, because you didn't just grow up and land this job. There's been a journey. So how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and if you look at my career, it's very nonlinear, and people are like, "How did you arrive here from there?" But the truth of the matter is, I grew up in relatively marginalized circumstances in Southeast Scarborough here in Toronto, and it was a really good opportunity for me to be exposed to the need state of young people. But I've always had this passion for meaningful work. And I also knew that to get to that place, I followed a corporate career. So I was the first in my family to go to university, which was an amazing feat. And when I finished university, I got into the corporate sector. I'll fast forward through that part, even though I learned how to mobilize resources and marketing and events, and that it taught me all the skills I needed to have in order to transfer those skills into meaningful work. Mm-hmm. So about 2009, or 2008, actually, I actually made a conscious decision to leave corporate life and move and apply my skills to more meaningful work. And my first opportunity was with UNICEF. And what I've always chased in my career is, what's the problem to solve? And it's a question I ask myself all the time. And oftentimes organizations are chasing the wrong problem state. And so therefore going, in a direction that may not get them to the outcomes they want, because they've asked a question maybe that doesn't deliver those outcomes. So it's been a wonderful, amazing journey. When I worked in international development, And for UNICEF, we had just left the box program. I don't know if you remember being on Halloween, going to door and saying, the candy and the pennies. Well, UNICEF had become a penny organization, a penny charity, and they had to walk away from that because, the volunteer experience of the PTAs were not to roll pennies and nickels and quarters and dimes for charity anymore. Moms weren't doing that. So we moved them into a more modernized version of themselves. And then I helped start a campaign called Because I'm a Girl with Plan Canada. And the problem to solve there is Plan had moved from foster parents plan to Plan without a brand journey, and that left them in a vulnerable position. And so the work that we did was, let's talk about gender equity as the primary campaign and draft the Plan brand. And so we were able to raise a lot of money for girls' rights and girls' issues at Plan. From there, I went to the Canadian Olympic Foundation as the executive director, and worked on making a high performance sport more accessible. And that was not a good, easy conversation for an elitist organization like the Canadian Olympic movement or the Olympic movement in general. And the problem to solve there was, how do we ensure that we're sending the best athletes from the country to the Olympic Games, not just the best athletes from the economically elite? And not a lot of people at the Canadian at the Olympic movement liked my question, but I stuck with it, and was able to create a program called Training Ground. So you might know that program, where we actually went across the country to find the best athletes, and RBC funded their high performance journey. So you're now seeing that cohort of athletes at the Olympic movement. And then came to Big Brothers Big Sisters, which was, a legendary brand, a legendary organization, a pristine intervention that had been dormant for quite a few years from a modernization perspective. And we were able to, over the last 5 years, prove why it works through evidence and impact modeling, as well as being outcomes driven versus activities and outputs driven. So it's been an amazing journey transforming this organization. And I'm really excited for what's to come here, but also what's to come in my career. So
Wow, super impressive resume.
it's different for sure.
Well, you say it's kind of like this all over the place, but I actually see there's two very consistent themes, which is like all the business skills that you are constantly putting toward meaningful work, right? Like you said, you wanted to do something meaningful. And so taking all your knowledge, your expertise in organization, in management, in problem solving, and taking it to these meaningful fields where you could make the greatest impact. So I see it as quite consistent in that sense, because you bring the same toolkit and the
Mhm.
same passion and the same goals each time,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And I love the asking the right question.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good one, and it's been something that I've been we've ended up at very different places because we actually did the work to, what's the problem we're trying to solve here. Because when I came to Big Brothers Big Sisters, when asked what's the problem to solve, is we don't have enough money. I'm like, actually, that's not the problem we have to solve. If we solve the right problem, the money will come, or the resources will come, or the volunteers will come. And so it's kind of like turning traditional charity on its head and saying, wait a minute, we have to think more like a profitable organization, a for-profit organization. It's just that we deliver social profit versus financial profit to our stakeholders.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
Mhm.
So how long have you been working with Big Brothers Big Sisters?
I've been here about 5.5 years, which is a long tenure for someone like me as a transformative leader. But the reason why I'm continuing my journey here is because I've actually gone back to school, and so the board of directors was incredibly progressive in that they wanted me to stay, and I was able to find a situation that works for everybody. It was a win-win, and a very, very progressive board. They have given me the opportunity to support me in my journey as I go back to school for the next few years.
Can I ask what you're studying?
Well, you'll be very interested because I'm studying psychotherapy at the Gestalt Institute here in Toronto.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, I'm going to retire to being a therapist, Marcia. So I'll be calling you for other things.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah,
Mhm.
wow. Well, and again, that makes sense because it's another way to put your passions into helping people in a
Mhm.
different way. That's
Mhm.
lovely. That's lovely. Well, it's going to be a very interesting career change, but I think again, you're going to bring some good tools, and
Mhm.
you know, the more tools you have in your toolkit, the better off everyone is, right?
Yes, yes, and I'm very passionate. I mean, passion has always driven my career, right? So, I'm not a hospital fundraiser. I'm not someone who will just go and do the institutional fundraising. That's just or operations. I have to be really passionate about the cause that I'm working on, and I'm very passionate about the family dynamic and the family system surrounding loved ones who have mental illness, and so that's where I'm putting my focus and efforts in this journey.
Well, the gestalt is the whole, right?
Sure is.
WHOLE. So
Yes.
yeah, so you're going to
I'm
be
learning a lot about myself in year 1, I'll tell you that.
for sure. Well, the best therapists are the ones who are the most introspective and willing to do their own inner work, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes. No excuses, at the Gestalt Institute for that, so
but that's good, because I remember when I was in my psychiatric training, and they encouraged the residents to get psychotherapy, but they didn't insist upon it. So there were lots of residents who never did, never kind of explored their own dynamics. And I think it was to their detriment and to the detriment of their future clients. So
Yeah, I agree with that, and, year 1 and 2 is really all about the self, so it's been harder than I think I signed up for, but,
yeah.
I've come a long way in my growing edges, and I've learned what my growing edges are and brought them into my consciousness, and I think that has made a huge difference in why this is a different modality for sure.
Yeah, and you can use it for everything.
Oh my gosh, I use it for everything. It's like everybody's winning.
Yeah. Yeah, your family, your current job, everything. Yeah, the self-awareness is a win for everyone. Yeah.
Agreed.
So how did you become such a passionate person? Like, was this something you were born with? Like,
Well, I'm a Scorpio, so I don't know if if you believe in astrological signs, I think it says Scorpio and my name. So I would say that passion is. I would say I over vector on passion, and I under index on patience. So interesting that you asked that question because my morning meditation today was on the dichotomy between passion and patience, and I'm in that dialectical tension right now as a human. So I think I was actually quite a shy child, and I would say small, like big S small, like very introverted. I am an introvert by nature. That's my natural preference. But I also have taught myself how to appear and present with extroverted behaviors. But knowing that self awareness, I think, has been something I've had since childhood. And I go down some pretty deep rabbit holes if I'm passionate about something, and I'm pretty tenacious to a fault sometimes. But I would say that it's something that is hasn't the passion part wasn't learned. It was just how to express it. That was like an inaccurate expression of passion. I'm definitely have been working on that, but I have tons of energy, and so it's been a wonderful part of who I believe it's a wonderful part of who I am as an authentic being, and I think a lot of it stems from my values and my clear articulation of my values and how I use my values to make good decisions or make any decision actually to have effective conversations and also as a bit of an accountability framework to ensure that I'm living in an aligned life with where I work, with who I interact with, and the projects that I get involved with.
you want to share a little bit about your values? Like, what are some values that are important to you?
Well, I have 3 core values that are unwavering, and I will and many have tried to push me off them, and they have been unsuccessful, and that's, integrity, for sure, The second one is authenticity, and the third is gratitude. I try to find grace and gratitude even in the, worst situations or most challenging situations. So I really abide by those three in an unwavering way. And then I have a series of essence values. When they're balanced, I'm thriving, understanding that I can't be unwavering in them. And that's innovation. I love innovation. I mean, if you ever have a brainstorm, invite me. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And thinking about problems in innovative ways. Joy, and when life isn't always joyful, but when you can feel like you haven't experienced joy, there are ways to consciously seek it out, and that's important. Deep connection. I prefer one-on-one intimate conversations or small group conversations. I really get anxiety walking into a room of people I don't know, and work the room. I can do it. I've taught myself how, but it's not my natural preference. Meaningful work. I believe happiness is a currency, and I'm very happy when I'm doing meaningful work. And the last one is courage. So I really do try to access courage as in the most authentic way possible. And I think that if you Google some of the areas and challenges that I've had, one specifically with the Canadian Olympic Committee that was quite public, accessing courage isn't 100% of the time, but when I love to know that it's there if I need to draw on it.
Those are wonderful values and very inspiring.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories from, how you were putting those values into practice in your career?
Yeah, so always. So every day is I'm making sure that I'm aligned with my own values, and not to get into the details of my situation at the Canadian Olympic Committee, but what happened was it was a breakdown in the values alignment, in that I took a job thinking that the organization had a set of values that aligned with my values, and when I got under the tent, I recognized that they were just words on a wall, and that became a very, very challenging and toxic environment for me. And so, I did take action within the first 3 years of my career there. I had to take significant action, which was very public, in that I filed a formal complaint against the chair and president of the Canadian Olympic Committee. And I came forward in 2017 as the unknown complainant. You have to remember, this was 2015, so it was pre Me Too. And it was something that, I never, as a primary breadwinner in my family, losing my job was the biggest, scariest thing. And yet I knew that it would be worse for me long term if I didn't take action. So I was willing to have the consequences that went with filing. As I look at my daughter, who's now 23, she was 16 at the time, and I didn't want to be able to. I didn't want to be in a situation where I looked at her, if she was in my situation, and say, "Well, you should quit." No, actually, there's a way that you can take someone to task when they're abusive. So that she was my mirror in that situation. She continues to be my mirror. Yesterday on International Women's Day, she was introduced to an event that I've been going to with Chris Simpson from Sportsnet since 2018, and we called it the Next Gen. So we want to surround our young women with inspiring women who have charted the course, and let's leave it better for them so they can do the next body of work, which is going to be continues to be heavy lifting.
For sure. So that's a great example of courage. Can you share a story about authenticity?
Mhm. Great.
How you use
Yes.
that?
So, as a young person, I was always very, I would say I was quite like social justice. I was, I'm a, qu- I'm an intuitive. So I honored that I'm an intuitive. And I think as a child, I was an intuitive, and I went through a phase where I was just like, I'm actually going to be someone else, in my career, because I've got to be I was in the insurance industry, and I was the only woman on the team. And so I kind of acted like I was actually described by, oh, you're so much like a dude in a woman's body, you're so easy to be around. You can golf, you can do all these things. And I like took that as a badge of honor, that actually this persona that I was putting out there was getting some uptake, and I was doing quite well in my career. What I realized though is that that was not my authentic self. And so as I transitioned from corporate life into, because I worked in packaged goods and I did that, but as I transitioned from corporate life into more meaningful work, I recognized that I'm way more authentic as who I am now. This is actually who I am and aspire to be, and I don't like who I am when I'm in that persona. So I feel very I feel like it's a skin that I used to be in, and so I'm way happier in my authentic skin for sure.
Yeah, it takes a lot more work to put on the persona, and it's
Totally.
one less thing to have to think about to just be yourself.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's just finding yourself in your authenticity too, right, Marcia? It's like I didn't know who my authentic self was, so that journey of self exploration and my spiritual journey and all that comes along with it has brought me to a place that's way more comfortable.
Nice. What about, do you have a story about integrity?
Yeah, for sure. So, in various organizations that I've worked for, I've been asked to do things that have been offside. Not, I don't just have one example, I have many. And I've always been, I have the muscle memory to say no. And, one thing I do a lot of mentorship, especially for young women and young people, is that if you don't have your integrity and understand what it feels like in your body to act within integrity, it's really hard to pull it out at the last minute, you know? And
Yeah.
so even the most benign things where you're feeling like your integrity, your honesty, your ethics are being challenged, your morals are being challenged, it's really standing up in those situations of when your integrity is challenged is builds the muscle memory. So when the big things happen, like, hey, sign this invoice and don't tell anyone, comes across your desk, then you can say, actually, I'm not comfortable doing that. And this is why. And so, yeah, I think that, standing tall and strong in your integrity is hard. It's hard work. And there's a spectrum of moral courage, eh? Like, yeah, it depends on what the consequences are. You have to do all your analysis, but I'm pretty comfortable in my integrity, and I think that other people would. I leave that behind in a room. That I'm to be trusted. I'm honest, and I'll act within my the ethical code always, despite the consequences.
Nice. So I'm going to ask you one more question about your values, which is, give me a story about your gratitude.
Mhm. Well, the easy thing to do is to find gratitude in the really lovely things. I am grateful for this cup of tea at 3:26 on a Thursday. The hardest part of gratitude is finding gratitude in challenging times, challenging people, challenging situations, and so I think that it's exploring what that is, and if you can find grace and gratitude in those challenges, you're going to be really you're going to be able to be 100% in gratitude. I have a gratitude practice, so every morning, like even in my I have a bullet journal, and the first thing I write when I get to work is like what I'm grateful for in my recent past, my present, and my future, and I write that like in pink every single day. So it's just a reminder, and they're not all good, it's not all good stuff. So but it's finding and just bringing it into your consciousness, like not just assuming you're grateful, saying you're grateful. And if you can't find anything that you're grateful for because you're in such a state, you can easily say, I am just grateful for this sip of tea. And that, to me, gratitude is the easiest way to move from a low frequency vibration, i.e. a fear-based vibration, into a love-based vibration. So that's how I keep it in my mind, is that if I'm in a low vibration, which I am, I have sad, I'm fearful, I'm like I have all the fear-based emotions, just like every other human. And the easiest way for me to transition from that low vibration into a higher vibration is through gratitude.
Cool. Well, you say you do a lot of mentoring. Who were your mentors when you were coming up?
Yeah, the interesting thing, I actually had quite a few, but in various different things. I would say growing up, I had some teachers who invested in me. I had one teacher in particular. I grew up on the wrong side of the track, so to speak, and my school stream would have taken me in a very, very different direction. If I look at the where I was supposed to go to school, and he was a huge advocate for me to going out of district to school, into a community that better suited someone like me. And I'm always grateful for him. I wish I could find him. He has no social media presence. Like, I don't know, but if David Sheehan is out there, my grade 5 teacher, he really was someone who mentored me and showed me new possibilities. He also introduced me to long distance running, and I'm still a long distance runner to this day. So yeah, so I would say in my young life, I had teachers all through high school. And then in my career, I would say my greatest teacher is a woman by the name of Paula Roberts, who was my boss at Plan International. And I actually went into an intentional mentorship relationship with her, where I took the job, and part of the compensation was her mentorship, whether I stayed or she stayed in the job or not. And she honored that. And I had some pretty significant skill gaps that I was able to fill because of her.
That's wonderful. It's so nice when you have those people to lean on and to feel supported by.
Exactly. Yeah.
So wonderful. You
Mhm.
know, you're a very interesting person because you have a lot of different sides. You have the corporate side, you have the spiritual side, you have the sports side. You know, it's a nice combination. I want to talk about the sports side because you say you're a runner and you work with the Olympic Committee. You do activities with Big Brothers Big Sisters. What's your take on the current climate in sport these days? Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the sports world right now, right? What's your take on what's going on these days? You want to comment on
Yeah.
any of it?
Of course, this is my favorite topic. I won't. I'll try to keep it short. But equity in sport has been on the agenda for a long time, like way before my time, and still we are making very, very limited, if any, progress. And I'm really interested in equity in a whole way, not just gender equity. So equity and availability to sport, intersectionality. I can be a woman. A Black woman would have even more difficulty breaking into the sport system. And I think that we do a lot on the backs of athletes, and we see a lot on the backs of athletes. And if you look at the national sport federations, they are not diverse at all, and yet the athletes are relative, depending on what sport, of course. And so I think that there's a bit of a reckoning right now for gender equity and equity in sport. And there's some hard questions being asked. If you look what happened with Hockey Canada, I think that the Hockey Canada issue was so significant because it was a breakdown in governance. I think it was horrible what happened. Yes, that's the issue. Really, what the bigger issue is, and the systemic issue, was the breakdown in governance. And if you look at why the governance broke down, you need to look no further than a year or two ago, where the board was all white and all men. So, how do you expect diversity to come into the conversation when everyone looks the same, acts the same, speaks the same, votes for the same? And there's a lot. There aren't a ton of people, in my experience, in the sport governance space and the sport leadership space with courage. That is, I have to say, because there's too much riding on speaking out, on the right side of good. And what I mean by that is, like, no one's going to compromise their tickets to the World Cup or their tickets to the Olympics or their cushy, board meetings and the bespoke suits and all this stuff. And that stuff all needs to be stripped away, because it's clouding the judgment, and the people who are suffering the most are the athletes, and by I would say extension of that are young people and kids who are in sport and not having a safe place to play. So it really flows downstream, right down to the youngest child who's embarking on the journey of sport. So in our case at Big Brothers Big Sisters, We can find some funding for kids to play sport, but the biggest challenge is if I'm a single mom with 3 kids and working 2 jobs, I can't get my kids to sport. So it's not even accessible to them, and as we're cutting sport and physical activity in schools, it's a real detriment to the most marginalized and vulnerable kids. I think that the kids of privilege are getting, skating lessons and shooting lessons and edging lessons and playing, high levels, but really the kids who potentially are the best athletes in this country are not getting the opportunities. So I would love to see an intersectionality assessment, not just gender. I would like to see it much wider. I want it. I think it should be justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And right now, there's no justice in sport.
That's a really, really important statement, and I hope that all the listeners really take it to heart and, you know, lobby for change. So speaking of sport, so the I just heard on the radio this morning about the Canadian Olympic Committee and their take on Russian athletes. Do you have any comments on that?
Um, Not really, other than I think we have to stick firm. I do think though that humans are humans regardless of where they're born. And it becomes incredibly political. This is what I mean is we have to sort of look at it in two things. It's political, but it shouldn't be on the backs of athletes to be political. Do you know what I mean? Like when we were in Sochi, of course, the 2S LGBTQ plus community was incredibly compromised because of the social values of Russia, and yet it was really on the backs of the athletes to bear that cross. And so I think there has to be further analysis and discussion about it. I know that Russian doping is a thing. I think that if you watch the documentary Icarus, it's pretty obvious what happened in Sochi, and probably likely. So I would see some rigor, but I think it's going to be a tough road ahead on that one for sure, because it really sucks for the athletes to have to bear the cross, or miss out on their journey because of it. On the flip side, sport is a vehicle to have big conversations. You just got to make sure that you're in your swim lane, so to speak.
Yeah, it is a really tough area right now.
Yeah,
It's very fraught.
yeah. And there's so much gray, right? Like it's not just like yes or no. It's not black and white. And I think that's one thing I would just offer to your listeners is that really look into the gray areas, because it's when there's a zero tolerance situation, it's easy to make a decision. When it's a low impact decision, it's easy to handle. It's that gray area in between that people think that it's black and white when it's actually very, very gray. And the unintended consequences, we have to make sure that we're thinking through the consequences, but the unintended potential consequences of making those decisions.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, this has been like such an interesting conversation. I could talk to you for hours, but I know you're a very busy woman, so I'm gonna wrap it up. But I have my three questions that I always ask at the end. So the first thing is, what are you currently working on that you're super passionate about?
School, for sure. So my Gestalt experience, my journey into therapy and being a therapist is I'm so passionate. Like I'm going into despite the fact I have to read, all my readings require a dictionary because I studied economics. I'm like, oh, what does that word mean? Couldn't we have said that easier? Anyway, so I would say that's my biggest passion right now, is that, and because that leads into what's next for me.
For sure, that sounds wonderful. And where can people find you if they're interested in, mentorship or asking you a question or just, brainstorming with you?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, I'm here every day at Big Brothers Big Sisters. So you can look for me online on the Big Brothers Big Sisters website. I also have, I don't really participate that much in socials, to be honest, but I am on LinkedIn, Leanne_Nicole, and I do a little bit on other social channels, but not worth mentioning. Like, my 8 followers might go to 10. So I leave that to my daughter. She's much better on socials, but I'm not that hard to find. And so yeah, you can absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest. If there's a social channel, that's the one I check the most.
Perfect. And for the last question, do you have a call to action for the listeners? Something that you would really love them to consider or to try?
Yes, for sure. If you have considered or are thinking of considering being a big brother, big sister, or being a mentor to a child in need, now is the time. There's never been more of a need for kids who need adults. And I don't mean even through big brothers, big sisters. I mean investing in this next generation by putting adult resources and supports, developmental relationships in this next generation. They can't do it on their own. And they can't get it through a device. So, whether it's you're an aunt or an uncle or and you just don't have time, I challenge that it's worth it. It's a pay it forward for sure. And investing in this next generation, they're going to require adults more than ever, and they're going to require sort of the hearts and love of adults more than ever because they've been really isolated, especially through the pandemic. So if you're interested in inquiring about Big Brothers Big Sisters, we're at bigbrothersbigsisters.ca/Toronto, and check us out. You can come and do a Bigs 101, which is our inquiry workshop, and see if it's right for you. It's a really minimal investment. It's only 2 hours a week. So I question how much scrolling you do or, what you watch on Netflix or any of the streaming services, but 2 hours a week in the life of a child can make the difference between thriving and not.
And I think another thing I just want to add is that the more we give, the better we feel. So it's really a
Oh, it's
win-win.
very transactional, 100%. And if you can't give time and being a big isn't right for you at this moment in time, we are not a government funded agency or organization. And I hustle for every dollar that comes, my team hustle for every dollar that comes in here to invest in human capital. So, yeah, and if you're a contact at the government and want to revisit that, I've got sharp elbows and I'm trying to get in there because our referral streams are, children's aid, our youth and mental health workers, our social service providers for the parent guardians. They're not just, mom walking in off the street. They're referred to
Mhm.
us by other social service agencies. So, please give if you can, even if it's a small amount. A little goes a long way here. For every dollar invested in the kids that we serve, there's a $23 return on social investment. So
Wow.
it's a pretty amazing intervention.
That's a really great call to action. And again, I hope the listeners really take it to heart.
Yeah.
Well, Leanne Nicole, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and you're very inspiring. And we need more people like you
Oh,
in all the walks of life. But it sounds like you're going through all the walks of life, from
yes.
corporate to what you're doing now to being a psychotherapist. So you're going to cover it all.
I know, I know, I know. I don't think my husband would agree. You need more of me, but more people like me would be great. He
Well, thanks.
constantly reminds me that I'm a lot, so I appreciate that very much, Marcia.
Well, thanks for being here today.
It's
And
my absolute pleasure.
this is Dr. Marcia Sirota. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review and your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter at marciasirotamd.com, where you'll learn about upcoming online events as well. Also, we love getting referrals from our listeners about future podcast guests, so please email us at info@marciasirotamd.com.